I'd like to call, well, he stopped it. Well, he did, and we're good, okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Board of Education for September the 11th, 2023. We need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Sorry, could the
Second.
could the motion state the
Yes, I'm
reasons,
sorry.
statutes,
Yep.
and the
The board will enter closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11, subsections A1, A3, A5, and A6 to consult with the attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege, to consider confidential personnel matters, and to prevent the disclosure of personnel information that confidential under North Carolina General Statute 115C319, and student information that is confidential under North Carolina General Statute 115C-402 and 20 United States Code 1232G.
Thank you.
Second?
I won't say, do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we will move into closed session and then be back in here at 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting of the Orange County School Board to order for September the 11th, 2023. Mr. Richmond, can you read the public charge, please?
Yes, ma'am. The Orange County Board of Education pledges to its citizens to conduct its business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy toward both school personnel and each other. A moment of silence will be observed before each meeting. The board asks that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be certain they are either turned off or on vibrate to avoid interruptions of the meeting.
Okay. Would you please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we will observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
We were going to pull, I think there was a request to pull from consent the Senate Bill 49
Okay.
item. That's correct, right? You had requested to pull that.
You wanted to pull, yeah, okay. All right, we will pull Senate Bill 49 from the consent agenda.
The policy updates, right?
The policy.
Policy update. Okay,
Motion so amended with the pulling of the
Okay.
following.
all in favor?
We need a second.
We need a
And
second.
a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will have public comment. We will now hear public comments, and speakers will be called in the order in which they signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Yielding time to other speakers is not permitted. If a speaker has written materials they would like to share, please hand them to our board clerk, Franklin McCoon, and he will distribute them to the board. The purpose of public comment is for the board to hear from members of the public, not to engage in back and forth discussions. Per our policy, board members will not respond to speakers during the public comment session. The board greatly values public comment and welcomes all comments regardless of viewpoint. However, please be reminded that children are often present at these meetings and that our public comment policy prohibits profanity, vulgarity, and personal abuse of any person. We ask that all comments be civil, respectful, and free of personal attack. Any speaker who violates our public comment period or otherwise exceeds the bounds of order and decorum will be given a warning. Continued violations may result in the speaker being ruled out of order, at which point we will move on to the next speaker. Mr. Richmond, will you please call our first speaker to the podium?
Yes, ma'am. We have first Miss Wendy Padilla.
Good evening, school board. My name is Wendy Padilla. I'm a community advocate. There has been discussions about parents' rights. Yes, I'm glad we have parents' rights. However, I am here to kindly remind you that students and teachers have rights as well. Yes, teachers and students need to be respected, and these discussions need to be had about their rights. I want students and teachers to know that they're not alone. The community is here. I'm here for you too. We need to look at all facets of schooling for our children who are the future of the United States. We are here for you, and no student or teacher should feel unsafe, period. We request the board to respect and honor all teachers' rights and students' rights. Progress for all. Thank you. Buenas noches, Junta Escolar. Me llamo Wendy Padilla, soy la defensora de la comunidad. Ha habido discusiones sobre los derechos de los padres. Sí, me gusta que tengamos derechos de los padres. Sin embargo, estoy aquí para recordarles habladamente que los estudiantes y los profesores también tienen derechos. Sí, los derechos de los estudiantes y los profesores deben ser respetados y discutidos. Quiero que los estudiantes y los profesores sepan que no están solos. La comunidad está aquí. Yo también estoy aquí para ustedes. Tenemos que ver todas las facetas de la escuela para nuestros hijos que son el futuro de los Estados Unidos. Estamos aquí para ti y ningún estudiante o profesor debería sentirse inseguro, punto. Solicitamos a la Junta que respete y honore los derechos de los estudiantes, profesores, progreso para todos. Gracias.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tia Hilber.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Tia Hilber, and I am a senior at Orange High School. I also play the flute and hold the leadership position of woodwind captain in our school's competitive marching band. On today's meeting agenda, there is a decision to be made that will affect our band for many years to come. As you all know, our band room currently has tiered risers. These have proved to be quite inconvenient. Every time we take our front ensemble percussion equipment to the practice field, football games, or competitions, students and parents must lift these heavy instruments up and down these risers multiple times a week. Most of them weigh upwards of 250 pounds, are around 6 feet long, and are thousands of dollars each. Really quick, can I have our present band members and parents raise your hands if you've had to help lift one of our percussion instruments? Yeah. As you can see, almost all of us have had to partake in this task, a task that has resulted in broken instruments and student injury. For example, one of our graduated seniors, Seth Honzik, severed a muscle in his back from helping to move the instruments. Or just last week, when a bar fell from beneath a marimba during lifting and caused permanent damage to the instrument. Today, we plan to end our band practice early, an incredibly rare occurrence within itself, to come here to show our support for getting these risers removed. I, along with everyone in the Orange High School band community, trust that you all will make the right decision on this issue to protect the safety and well-being of our band students and instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia.
Next, we have Finley White.
Orange County School Board. My name is Finley White, and I'm a senior at Orange High School. I'm also the head drum major for the Panther Regiment Marching Band. As many of you know, we are a traveling competitive marching band. We perform not only at football games, but at prestigious competitions as well. Our marching band is a key component of our community and keeps our generation involved in Orange County. The marching band is just one of the many ensembles offered to us, the band program at Orange High School, as we have wind ensemble, symphonic band, percussion ensemble, jazz band, winter percussion, and winter guard. Today, we are stressing to you all the need for the renovation of eliminating the risers in our band room. A key component of our band program is our percussion instruments. We are very lucky to have expensive marimbas, vibraphones, bass drums, and many more diverse percussion equipment. The heaviest, the marimbas, weigh on average 250 to 300 pounds. These instruments are on average 6 to 7 feet in length. Although we have 4 to 5 individuals carrying these instruments over many risers, due to the instruments being extremely heavy, they can be dangerous to pick up. These instruments come on wheels and are meant to be moved on flat surfaces, but not lifted up and down stairs. Lifting these heavy instruments could result in injury. For example, a senior last year who talked to you, Seth Honzik, suffered from an extreme back injury. Not to mention the cost of some of these instruments range from $6,000 to $11,000 each. When high school students and parents volunteer to lift these instruments, it is very easy for them to become damaged and warped, as we have seen happen many times over the past few years. We have dealt with broken keys, damaged resonators, and warped frames, which are very costly to replace with new parts. We are extremely fortunate to have these percussion pieces, and we would like them to last as long as possible. Taking away the risers would lessen the risk of them being disfigured and destroyed. Our concert band is also extremely respected and perform many concerts per year for the community. The elimination of the risers would allow our ensembles to create the modern and specialized setup needed for the music we perform. We currently perform concerts on a flat stage in our auditorium, and we should be able to rehearse on a flat surface as well. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us all and hearing our concerns. I hope these concerns resonate with you all and we can solve this problem for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is August Wilson.
Good evening, board members. My name is August Wilson. I am a freshman percussionist at Orange High School. During my time here, I have seen that the band has a need for the removal of the risers in the band room. We need this removal because multiple students, past and present, have gotten injured while lifting the percussion instruments. We lift about 8 instruments, 1 to 2 times each practice, and many of them have also gotten damaged in the process. The average marimba weighs around 250 to 300 pounds and is very bulky. It takes several of us to lift the instruments up and down the risers. It is very hard for us as students and on the instruments as well. This is not only a problem during marching band season, but throughout the entire school year. Our daily percussion ensemble class is unable to rehearse properly in the correct setup due to the constrictions of the risers. Also, the risers do not make the band room ADA compliant, which prohibits students in a wheelchair or with mobility restrictions from participating in band. The only solution that could fix all of these barriers that we face is to remove the risers. I hope you will approve the funding to renovate our band room. Band is such a huge part of our high school experience and gives us a community that we would not have otherwise. Having an up-to-date facility would be enormously helpful, giving us more time dedicated to practicing and less risk or injury or damage to the instruments, and making the band room an inclusive space for all. I hope that my input will let you consider our proposal and that after today, our time with lifting the instruments will be short.
Thank you.
Next is Isabel Lynn.
Good evening. My name is Isabel Lynn, and I'm a senior at Orange High School. I'm the flute section leader, and I have been in marching band and spring ensemble class for all 4 years of high school. Not only have the risers in the band room caused harm to able-bodied students who have an interest in band, but it also poses a very large challenge to disabled students. Band has impacted my life in an immensely positive way. It has given me a strong sense of community and helps me to grow every day as a musician and a person. Everybody should have access to that opportunity. Eliminating the risers in the band room will bring the room into ADA compliance, making it a welcoming space for everyone, especially disabled individuals who use devices such as a wheelchair or cane. It will also make the band room an easier place to navigate for students who have temporary injuries and may be on crutches or in a cast. We want our community to grow, and we want it to be an activity that anyone can enjoy and participate in. Taking the risers out would allow any and every student to participate in the band and our growing community. I'm an able-bodied person, so I want to share some quotes by disabled people that spark understanding of something that I cannot speak on personally. Author, journalist, and disabled rights activist Alice Wong has written, "The peculiar drama of my life has placed me in a world that by and large thinks it would be better if people like me did not exist. My fight has been for accommodation, the world to me and me to the world. I ask you tonight to help us ensure that people know and feel that they not only deserve to exist, but deserve access to resources that help them thrive. The last quote I will leave you with tonight is by comedian, journalist, and activist Stella Young. My disability exists not because I use a wheelchair, but because the broader environment isn't accessible. I hope that your decision tonight reflects the broader changes we want to make in the world to make activities and education more accessible for all people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next is Jack Panning.
Orange County School Board, thank you for having me. My name is Jack Panning and I'm a senior at Orange High School. I currently serve as percussion captain in our competitive marching band. When I first stepped foot in the band room at Orange, I was quite puzzled by the existence of the risers. In fact, I asked the upperclassmen why they were even there. The best answer I got was, well, it was the 70s and that was how band rooms were built back then. Suffice to say, I found that answer unsatisfactory considering it's been 50 years since then. These risers are older than my father. Since then, I've realized that they are a hindrance to the experience of every single member of band and serve as a serious obstacle for the growth of our program. As a percussionist, I've had a lot of experience playing and moving our instruments. Besides marching band, we compete at a high level in winter percussion and regularly do a variety of percussion ensemble pieces. The risers directly limit what pieces we are able to play, as most composers assume you have a flat rehearsal space. Last year, during winter percussion, we were forced to rehearse in the school's lobby because we required a flat area. It's frustrating that we even had to do this in the first place, but this also meant that we had to carry all of our equipment up and down the risers every rehearsal, which is extremely strenuous and dangerous. These risers pose an enormous safety risk. It's not hard to see how lifting large instruments up and down steps could end poorly, but unfortunately, a fellow percussionist who spoke to this board last year, Seth Hanzik, seriously injured his back during last year's marching band season as a result of frequently lifting these instruments. He was unable to come to rehearsal for multiple weeks, and he even ended up missing a competition, which negatively affected our band. Additionally, the risers are not accessible at all. I'm thankful to be able-bodied, but were I not, my ability to participate in band would be hampered. The risers in our band room reflect a bygone era. For the safety and success of our program, I urge you to vote in favor of this renovation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next is Lori Tepper.
First, kudos to the band members here. Good evening, board members and Dr. Merrill. Tonight, I just want to let you know that I'm praying for all of you, both individually, by name, and collectively as colleagues. I pray that truth is revealed to you, and if any corruption is occurring at any level within the district, that it would be exposed, and you in turn would root it out. Quoting Albert Einstein, whoever is careless with the truth in small matters cannot be trusted with important matters. I pray that integrity is one of your highest standards, so that you will do the right things and not compromise truth. A lot of motives drive decision-making in our culture. What place does integrity hold in your decisions? Your integrity might cost you something, but it will also earn the public's trust. The book of Proverbs, chapter 10, verse 9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." I pray that God gives you wisdom and discernment when you are making the tough decisions. We all need to check our hearts regularly. I pray that the Lord reveals to you anything that you might need to turn from, and I pray that daily for myself. I pray that you have listening ears to hear both concerns and praises from students, staff, parents, and the community. I pray that your hearts and minds would be open to truly understand what the community is conveying to you, as well as when you meet together privately. I pray that God gives you strength, endurance, energy, and rest as you face each day. We all want what is best for all students to not just survive, but to thrive, be challenged, grow in academics and character as they mature into responsible, caring adults. Thank you all for serving. I know this is not an easy job for you.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have David Ogden.
I never knew I cared so much about risers. Tonight, I was taken back by this impressive action of the students. I think I heard more constructive comments about how to improve schools than I did in many of the previous board meetings combined. How refreshing to hear these students talk about real, tangible problems in our schools. What an amazing representation they are of our schools in our county. I'm grateful for their example. I'm inspired by their passion for their music, their work, their school, and their community, and their concern for each other and those who need more. I'm hopeful that as adults in our community, we can learn from what we've witnessed here, to come together for things we have in common, to be cheerful and respectful in our request for change, and to learn to work together to accomplish something important. Thank you, students.
Thank you. Thank you all who came and spoke, and thank you, students. We heard you loud and clear, so thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. Okay, at this time, if it's okay, we can move the Senate Bill 49 to the end of the discussion action items, I think. Can we not? Yeah, but we're going to do that, but I just wanted to make sure that we got that in. Yes, we do have board comments, and then we have comments by our superintendent. So Ms. Hauser, we'll start with you tonight on that end.
Sure, thank you. I first wanted to thank you, Mrs. Purcell, for your clarification on public comment in board meetings and keeping our boardrooms safe, a safe place. I am truly grateful to everyone who including, I want to say especially, but certainly including our students who take the time to come to speak to us about their experience in the schools and concerns that are on your mind. Again, this is an important to be a safe space, and we really want to hear from you. If you're not comfortable with public comment, we would ask you to email us or call us. Several of us have phone numbers on the website, so we do want to hear from you, so thank you for that. Second, I also wanted to express a great big thank you to Dr. Iris Chapman for her beautiful documentary on Central High School. I had the honor to see it yesterday in the delightful company of former school board chair and Dolores Chapman, who also was a teacher at Central High, and with Marie McAdoo, who was a graduate of Central High. The film captures the important and proud legacy of this school, along with the challenges of integrating our schools in the late 60s. There are things that we need to look at and learn from it, and I wonder if we might be able to explore ways to create showings of this documentary within the district. It is really a beautiful and important film.
Okay, Mr. Atherton?
I just wanted to thank all the students coming out tonight and really sharing your perspectives, and just know that it's been a journey to even get the proposal onto our agenda, which started, I think, last year from looking at the problem and getting it here. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and really enjoy all of the shows y'all do throughout the year. And thank you, parents, for supporting the students and getting them on time, and all the events and practices throughout the year. Everybody else that came out to speak, thank you for coming out and taking the time. It really helps us to understand the concerns. The only other thing I wanted to mention was it was great on first day for us to, as a board, to all go out to the different schools and welcome students back into schools, teachers, family, staff, and really appreciate that that's something we do as a board. So that's all I have.
Okay, Thank you. Mr. Richmond?
I just have a couple of things. I just want to recognize, say welcome back to all the students, all the traditional school students. I think the school year has started off really, really well. And I am so glad to see the happy faces coming into the schools. And lastly, I just want to recognize all the souls that were lost on this day on September the 11th in 2001. During that year, I was a teacher assistant at Grady Brown with the autistic program there. And I remember watching everything take place on the TV and in the classrooms. So that is a day that I'll never forget. But I just wanted to recognize this day and recognize all those fallen souls that we lost on 9/11.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Dr. Moore?
I wanted to say thank you to parents, guardians, and this wonderful sea of orange, how you guys all came together to advocate tonight. I attended the LELA 101 Top 10 Premier Public School Funding Process through UNC School of Government on September the 6th, and Building Healthier Communities, the role of school nurses in promoting public health in schools through EdWeb on September 8th. Thank you.
Ms. Smiley?
Great. Thank you to all the students who came out. We want to keep hearing from you as you have comments about other things. Come back anytime. I think this is our first public comment since these terrible state bills passed, and so I just wanted to take one moment to say how deeply committed I am to this being a school district where every single student and staff member is seen for their full selves and who they are, and is valued and respected and loved. And yeah, I hope we continue to do that. And then I just wanted to thank everybody. So this afternoon, about half an hour before dismissal, I think, some company out on Orange High School Road cut through the power and the water, and it shut Orange High School Road about a half an hour before dismissal at Orange Middle School. And a whole bunch of people scrambled to then figure out what to do and how to notify families and how to cancel athletics and how to keep everybody safe and get them to their cars and reroute all the traffic. And it was a very long line, and, you know, all that. But I just appreciate everybody's efforts to sort of come together, make it happen. And luckily, it was not a huge issue, and they were able to open up the street again and all that. But just thank you to everybody who kind of dropped everything and made that happen. I experienced it, given all of it, I would say pretty smoothly. So thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, parents, and especially Orange High School Band. And I look forward to hearing you all soon as well. Thankful for everyone who's put so much work into a successful start of school, including our transportation department, and everyone who's had to work hard to make sure all students are served with their transportation needs. I had the pleasure of going to Hillsborough's STEM night, which I think was last week already, which was really fun and exciting and inclusive. And I also wanted to speak to this bill and all the challenge and stress I've been hearing from community members and parents and students, and as an educator myself again these days, I was part of the NCAE recent phone call, and I really appreciated the words from NCAE President Tamika Walker-Kelly, who spoke to every student deserving the freedom to learn in a classroom that is safe and welcoming to all, and how much this bill is really in conflict with educators' commitments to serve students. And so I hold that that tension close to my heart as we work through this year.
Thank you. I would also like to thank everyone for being here tonight again, and especially our Orange High School contingency. We appreciate that. I would also like to thank everyone who helped get this school year off to a very smooth start, particularly our maintenance department and our transportation department. They have worked tirelessly to get this done, as well as all of our teaching staff and all of our staff in schools. So I just want to give a big shout out and thank you to them. I also want to say that I had the opportunity with Ms. Doyle to attend the STEM night at Hillsborough Elementary last Thursday evening, and it was absolutely fantastic to see all of those students in that gym doing all kinds of things that they never thought that they would even do. And they were having fun, but they were learning at the same time. And it's just a very rewarding thing to go and see, and I appreciate being invited to that. So that's all comments that we have. Dr. Merrill, do you have any comments?
Yes, Ms. Purcell, just a couple items. I too want to recognize the quality of the school opening, which was made successful by so many people, notwithstanding Hillsborough Year-Round Elementary, which had already opened some weeks ahead for us. We opened in very good shape. Our staff vacancies were down from the prior year by almost half. All bus driver positions were filled. Principals had completed schedules for their staff, students, and families, and our buildings were ready and remain so. Maintenance, food service, office support staff, central staff, teachers, parents, all made it happen. We had to work through a few bumps, as always, and we still need some staff positions to be filled, but we will continue to improve every day. So I thank all who contributed to our successful opening. And to restate Andre's comments, September 11, 2001, on this day 22 years ago, America was attacked at multiple sites in Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania. And I remind us tonight of the loss of life and the heroism that unfolded that day, and may we never forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill. Okay, we have our consent agenda with Senate Bill 49 pulled and moved to the what did I say? Discussion item D. So do I have a motion to accept our, do I have a, I cannot think of the name. A motion to accept our amended agenda.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. This has passed, and we will move on. And I'm flustered because I had my agenda printed off, but it was the wrong agenda. So I'm having to do things that I don't normally do, and that's use my computer to do all of it. And I'm trying to work my way through that. So forgive me for that. Okay, on our discussion item A, fiscal year 2023-2024 board budget priorities, we have Mrs. Rath.
Yes, hi. Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, board members, superintendent, and public and staff. I'm here this evening to take any questions that you may have in regards to the agenda abstract regarding the budget for the remaining $703,000 funds that were unbudgeted per our last meeting of the fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay, does anyone have questions? Mrs. Smiley?
Great. Thank you so much for taking our feedback from the last meeting and coming back with this clear proposal. We appreciate that. One question, and I appreciate, so in the flexible school grant approach, I support the idea of taking a set of these funds and making them a grant like that to the schools. There's a question in there, I think, about using an ADM allotment versus a risk-based allotment. I'm in favor of the risk-based allotment to sort of more strategically direct those dollars. And I understand and appreciate why you would not put school names next to those. But what I am wondering about the sort of risk-based assessment is, I've been spending some time looking at the state achievement, the results from the end of grade and end of course testing from the end of the year. And the places where I think we have the greatest need in terms of making, accelerating our progress are in middle and high schools. And, you know, those are the grades, when I think back to the past few years, those are the grades where we're just having the hardest time recovering from the learning loss at this point. And so I'm wondering if we should have more, even more of this funding go to middle school and high school to do things to address the additional learning loss there. Yeah, so I know we don't have school names next to these, so it might be that the risk-based sort of already accounts for that, but I would be in favor when I look at that data at really thinking about directing more of the dollars to middle and high school.
Okay, anyone else? Comments? Ms. Hauser?
I actually have a couple questions. I like the risk-based approach. I like the ADM risk-based approach. I had two questions. One is, we agreed last week to commit $80,000 for an ELL teacher, but I was curious if that position will be assigned to a school. And my second question is, we're designating this $500,000 as non-recurring, and I was curious, it is recurring local funds. I was curious why it wouldn't be recurring, because if it were recurring, I think our principals would have a little bit more flexibility about what they could do with it, including bringing on additional staff.
I don't have an answer in regards to the ELL individual, in regards that they're going to be specific to a school. In regards to the 500,000, I know from my lens, the approach there was for this current year, it would be a one-time allocation. And as we go into the next budget cycle, in the event that we do have additional funds that are received from the county, that the board would have the ability at that time to utilize those funds for other initiatives that we did not get to address this year that were on the expansion list.
Can I just clarify? I think the discussion last time was ESSER funding runs out a year from today. And so if we use the money this year, but then have it free and flexible for next year, that gives us opportunity to move some of the ESSER funded positions that we decide to maintain. It gives us the money to do it.
Correct.
Okay.
I can add a little, one sec. I think that's our ELL question. Yeah, one sec. Just a little bit. It's something new, and I wanted to box this in for no more than a year and see how it goes in effect and cover our bets, if you will. ESSER, of course, is one piece. And just a little uncomfortable pre-committing next year's budget for almost 700,000 when you might want to do something differently. And then finally, I would work with school leaders, and if they have a person in mind, they can still go with a person, but they'd have to be brought in on what we'd call soft money, with a very clear understanding that their term would end at the end of this school year. So that was trying to put some guardrails around as we built this.
Thank you.
ELL.
Hi, sorry. Good evening. So to answer your question, Ms. Hauser, about the ESL position, we would have that be a school-based position. So currently we are waiting on 2 schools to finish all of their WIDA screeners, which are the assessments that are done at the beginning of the year, to finalize the students who are eligible to be added to our ML population. As you know, that population continues to grow, and we are over 900 students at this time. With the addition of this position, we would have our ratios below 1 to 51 in all of our schools based on the current numbers. But again, I'm waiting still on 2 schools to finish their WIDA screeners, but it will be a school-based position.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Mr. Atherton?
So mine is less of a question, but one, I am in support of the risk base as well. And the second is just confirmation from the worksheet. I see we have earmarked $50K for the employee relations ombudsman, and so that still would be within the budget going forward as well?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Just for clarity, the motion we're approving is the recommendations plus the risk-based funding?
Yes.
Okay, second.
I'm also in favor of risk-based
Could I-
as well.
Is there time for discussion after the second?
Yes.
Somebody wants a second?
Yes. Anyone second? All right, any discussion?
So just to my question about putting more funding in middle schools and high schools, I'm curious if this already, if the risk base builds that in sufficiently, like in general, are we looking at putting more resources towards middle and high schools to address the additional learning loss there? And I know that isn't a Ms. Rath question.
I'd have to go back to the full table, but the primary variable we were looking at was students below grade level.
Okay.
And some of your analysis might have been growth by subgroup and some of those pieces, but it was a more macro by school.
I think, yeah, I was looking more at like rate of growth and distance from pre-pandemic and things like that. I mean, I think it will probably, if you're looking at percent below grade level, it'll probably cover it. That's what I would think. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor of this motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
May I clarify then, that would represent to us, unless I misunderstand, that you've made a decision to balance the local budget, which we would then bring back to you at the next meeting with a resolution, the analysis, et cetera, and that would be your motion to finish this part up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, members of the board, Dr. Merrill. This evening, we're seeking authorization to bid and design the band room riser removal at Orange High School. The band room riser floor plan concept is dated. We believe some renovations will assist in this new design and would update the space, eliminate the need for students and staff to lift band equipment accordingly. With us today to discuss the design concept and answer any questions regarding it is David Teller from CRA Associates.
Good evening. And I'd just like to make one clarification to the authorization. The band room and choral room both have concrete risers in them. And from an accessibility standpoint, I believe that creates the same problems as the band room does right now. So we would recommend that the authorization include the band and choral rooms. And the estimate that you saw in the write-up would be for both of those. That's a construction estimate that CRA put together. Very, very preliminary. We won't know how much it costs to do this work until a general contractor, puts his pencil to it. But that's our estimate for right now, how much we believe it would cost to do both the band and choral room. Let's see. Can you talk about restrooms, or is that separate?
I would just address the sequence while we're doing this.
Okay. So CRA, we've been working with Patrick and Dwayne for quite a while now. What you'll see, I may be a little bit out of order here, so I apologize. We recently took construction bids on the restroom renovation and addition at Orange High School, and you can see from the plan up there, we're touching
virtually every restroom in the facility. There were two that we deferred and we will come back to you for. And that was one, the EC classroom, because there's been so many makeshift improvements to that, and it's got a washer and dryer and other components to it, that we felt it was best to do that as a separate small project. And the second one are the restrooms in the ag building, because they are very limited in size right now, and we would have to work with the teachers to perhaps take over part of their adjacent storage to create a restroom large enough that would serve more than one student at a time. So in the future, we'll be coming back to you with authorization to proceed on those two restrooms. Otherwise, we are touching every restroom in the facility and bringing it up to ADA compliance, replacing toilet partitions. We're retiling every restroom in the facility, replacing toilet fixtures, plumbing fixtures, and we feel Herod and Associates, we've worked with them on several projects in the past, and they'll do a good job for you. So going back to the band room, just to follow up, we see it as really three issues, and that is safety, flexibility, and that's not the most important, handicap accessibility. As a former high school trombone player, I can tell you, yeah, I played on risers my entire career, and it was a pain. But it does not meet current construction standards. Times change, and so I'm glad that we'll be able to remedy something that Orange High School has had to live with since 1977 when that wing was built. So I think that's all I have to say. Dwayne, Patrick. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Mr. Atherton?
I just had one. On the diagram, it does show the exit door repaired, but it doesn't list it in the specific items. I assume the bid includes repairing the exit door as well to properly shut.
We have a second ongoing study with REI that does nothing but roofs, and we feel like that the core problem is within the roof system. So yes, it will be repaired. It's a question whether it's under the scope of this project or what we've already authorized REI to do.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Ms. Miley?
I'm just curious what the approximate timeline might be for this to be final. I know we're going to be putting out to bid, and then what's the
Yeah,
timeline?
we're very close to being able to put the band and choral room out to bid. We had done a lot of that design work even when the toilet project was put out to bid. So we'll be able to do that fairly soon. With the extent of that work, I would not do that until summer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way we will put our bid documents together and try to get in and out in the, whatever it is, 10 weeks of summer. And I think it's a doable project for a general contractor to be able to handle that amount of work in 10 weeks.
So that brings up a different question. They do a lot of stuff in the summer. Are we going to have them in a different part of the facility while that renovation is being done?
That's above my pay grade.
Gentleman behind you.
Sure, absolutely. We'll have to navigate that space and create some opportunities elsewhere so that can continue throughout the summer as well.
At least there's more available space over the summer, so.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Motion to approve?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
In the spirit of full disclosure, excuse me, I do want to make one comment. My oldest son was a band member in 2000, 2004. He was a percussionist. He was a band leader, a section leader, an all-state band member. He was nominated to governor's school in percussion. He is now a pilot in the United States Marine Corps. So in the course of this, I was texting him and making him aware what was going on. And he said, "So what's the problem?" So my presentation has been very objective. Thanks.
For sharing. All right. See what happens when you come out in force? Okay, let's move on to policy 1310, stakeholder feedback process. If I'm looking at it right.
Madam Chair, if you'd like, I could sort of set the stage for this discussion. It's a board discussion, but essentially so the policies. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of ourselves. We're talking about the stakeholder. Well, I'll go ahead and set the stage for this. You have on your agenda for the consent agenda that's been pulled for discussion and action several policies that are required to implement at Senate Bill 49, the Parents' Bill of Rights. Those policies are relatively straightforward changes that are essentially tracking legal requirements. The broader issue relates to policy 1310, which is a policy on parental involvement in the schools. And there, the Senate Bill 49 requires you to adopt such a policy, but it also requires consultation with parents, teachers, administrators, and community partners before the policy is adopted. So I believe the question for the board is, how do you want to engage in that level of consultation? There's no specific legal requirements as to how you do that, so it's really up to you. And that's just to set the stage for your discussion.
And we are open for discussion on that and how we would like to proceed. Anybody have thoughts after looking at this? And it is very involved and a lot for us to go through. Ms. Molly?
I can start. So I know that some other school districts have already sort of started down this path. I saw that Cumberland County yesterday in a district-wide announcement sort of sent out a Google form with links to the different, they're asking for feedback on several policies. You know, I think that's one thing we should certainly do is like have the message that goes out in the weekly messages to families with a Google Doc. I think while I think that this Senate bill is stupid, I do think that the ways that we engage families and caregivers can be improved, and that probably this policy can be improved. I would be really in favor of talking with our family liaisons, especially having them take a look at the policy, getting together with some of our regular community partners, the Family Success Alliance navigators, some of the others who are just really familiar with the challenges that we've had with engaging families, so that maybe they can help contribute to some solutions there. And then in terms of staff and teacher input, I don't know if the teacher roundtable sort of concept is up and running yet, Dr. Merrill, but this seems like a really good idea for that. Maybe it could be yeah, that seems like a group that might have some really good thoughts. So a couple of ideas.
Okay. I also, just as I'm sitting here thinking, PTAs at this time of year, you generally get a lot of people to come into PTA meetings, especially in your elementary schools. And if something can be brought up in that setting, I would say that would be a good way to start. Just a thought. But I like the ideas of the Google form as well. Dr. Moore, I'm sorry.
I saw on Wake County, and I think it was Brunswick County too, where they have a feedback link on their website encouraging involvement from families to, ask questions and provide feedback using the online form. So I'm guessing, I don't know if their communications officer manages that, but it seems like that's working pretty well from what I read online.
It's a good idea. Yes, ma'am.
I think we should also provide opportunity for students to give input on any questions, concerns, advice, expressing their own family needs, and access.
Sounds good. Thank you. Mr. Atherton?
Yeah, I would definitely like to make sure we do some kind of public meeting to get feedback, because although the internet links are nice, we still have a lot of families that don't have internet, or, going out in the community, whether we, use the community centers or somewhere, just, a couple of those meetings to give people the opportunity to come and speak, or, give that feedback on some of their thoughts, whether it's a teacher, families, students.
Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, I just all great comments. I just wanted to add that I want to welcome comments that are not just around Senate Bill 49, but also just general comments about our parent involvement process and how we can make it better.
Mr. Richmond?
I think maybe this is a perfect time at community engagement meeting where we can have a discussion on, I know our last community engagement meeting, or previous community engagement meetings, we were trying to do some type of town hall. And so maybe this is a good opportunity to continue that and then get some feedback from our community partners and citizens.
Can I name it just a couple of other?
Yes,
That
ma'am.
occurred to me later. One is school counselors and social workers, I think, and administrators, obviously, really important for them to weigh in, as well as the equity task force.
Absolutely. Okay, any others? Any other thoughts? Okay. All right, well, we've got plenty to work with and get started with, I think, as we look at this and begin to wade our way through it.
Mrs. Purcell, I would
Yes.
just, I don't know whether, are we at a stage where you can begin to put any of these into specific requests that you would like to see? We heard a lot of concrete steps mentioned already this evening, and I wonder if you want to get started on any of those.
Well, we certainly
We're here to
can.
take direction from the board on this.
Well, my thought was I wrote all of these down and I was going to share them with Dr. Merrill, and Dr. Merrill has written them down as well, and that he would weed them out as to where they went, I'm thinking. Am I correct?
Yeah, you've given me a lot of who, a little bit of how. So let us work on the how, because different groups would be different methodologies. So let us come back to you with some thinking on how we could bite-size this and still try and touch all your groups.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one other group I want to make sure that we look at is, a couple of years back, we started the EC group where we brought in parents, and I definitely want to make sure that we are reaching out to those parents and making sure that those families have input as well.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, now we added a D to this, and that is Senate Bill 49. And Ms. Doyle had asked to pull that tonight, so I'm going to let her start off.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Purcell. So there were, as Neil mentioned, a couple sort of straightforward, relatively straightforward policy recommendations that came out of policy committee. And I just wanted us to pause and point out the one about surveys of students, policy 4720. This was disheartening to me that this bill requires active consent for all surveys. It was just a year and a half ago that we changed this policy with a lot of advice from our community partners in youth well-being and mental health for the importance of the youth risk behavior survey to be passive consent. One of those partners sent us an email and said that for another North Carolina district, one of the largest in our state, when they had the passive consent, their student response rate was 63% at the high school level and 74% at the middle school level. And then when it switched to opt-in permission for participation, it dropped to 23% and 26%. And this really inhibits schools' ability to compare and identify student need and well-being with a nationally utilized survey. And so it leaves us less able to assess student need.
Any comments, thoughts on that or anything else? Yes, Sarah.
Well, I just want to fully agree with that. It's ridiculous and is going to be harmful. I have a couple of the other policies I wanted to ask some questions about. So policy 4335, criminal behavior, there's an addition. I mean, it's I think it's whatever. I think the addition is whatever. But it says, like, in addition, the principal or designee must promptly notify the parents if a school system employee suspects any criminal offense has been committed against the parent's child. That seems reasonable. Here's my question, and this is actually from our original policy, but might as well ask. So when it says notify the parents, plural, is notifying one parent sufficient for fulfilling our duties there? If the child is in the care of a legal guardian, is that sufficient, or must their birth parents or adoptive parents be identified? What does parents mean there?
That's not a question I've had before. I think generally speaking, when there's a requirement for parental notification, it's discharged by notifying a parent, at least a parent who has a custodial parent. I'm not aware in other contexts of any requirement that you contact both parents. If they're, for example, divorced parents living separately, I think the notice requirement generally is understood to be discharged if you provide notice to one. But that's a good question. I don't think there's any guidance in the statute itself on that point.
So one thing possibly to consider is changing that to a parent or legal guardian rather than parents. That's it. It's at the very end.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it in the statute. I'm not really sure how to.
Maybe, is this going back to policy committee or no?
It's on the board. It's here for first reading.
This is just first reading.
One option would be to approve on first reading. Let me come back to you before the next meeting with, whether I think there's room to revise that. In all likelihood, these are School Board Association policy updates to their model policies. I did look them over and I thought, and it seemed like they just hugged the statute. I mean, they're trying to just restate what the statutory requirements are.
Yeah.
In which case, it may be more of an interpretive operational question as to what do you do? This is the law. What do you do to implement it? And we could address that and give you further guidance. Off the top of my head, I don't have a good response to that question.
Okay, I'd just love to make sure that our policies make it clear somewhere when we say parents, what we mean by that, or just change language to a parent or legal guardian. That was the only thing I had on that one. Policy 3540 says, and this is from the law, instruction on gender identity, sexual activity, or sexuality will not be included in the health education program in kindergarten through fourth grade. Is that going to restrict students from learning about any topics in the standard course of study for fourth grade For example, the standard, understand the changes that occur during puberty and adolescence.
I'm not familiar with enough with the standard and course of study to really advise you on that, but again, we can, I mean, this is the legal requirement is reflected pretty much verbatim in the policy, so I don't think there's much wiggle room there, but we can certainly answer any questions about its impact on particular instructional materials if upon review.
And does the law define the terms gender identity, sexual activity, or sexuality?
No.
It does not. Excellent. Okay. Those were my questions. I understand that we're not able to clarify them right now.
What was the other case?
But as we said, this is first reading, so Mr. Ramey will bring back information to us next time.
Yeah, I just want to add, I'm not going to be able to vote for that one. I'm not going to vote for that. So,
Okay.
Which one, Sarah?
3540. I understand it's in the law. I respect that. But on a conscience level, I can't vote for that one.
Okay. Anything else on these? Any other questions? So we will look for these back with answers.
We have to approve.
We have to
Yes, you need
approve,
on
excuse me,
first reading, but understanding it does come back for further review.
with
and
the
with-
information
and
that you're going to
I'll look
provide.
into the question about parental notification. Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, on the there are no definitions of those terms. I'd like to request that we clarify what those terms mean and what they do not include.
On 3540.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve these on first reading?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So four ayes and 3 noes. Okay. And we will look for these on second reading. Okay? Good evening.
Well, good evening, Board Chair, Ms. Purcell, Vice Chair, Mr. Richmond, board members, and Dr. Merrill. I'm always excited and pleased to bring members of my team to share information about the work that's taking place in curriculum and instruction. This evening, we have the opportunity to provide highlights of our Summer Scholars Program. And again, I'm going to emphasize highlights. We know we've provided lots of information in the abstract, so they're going to give just one or two comments from each of our programs, elementary, middle, and high school, as well as some considerations as we think about for next year, and then answer any questions you have. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my team.
Good evening again. We are so excited to be here with you to talk a little bit about all of the things that happened this summer for our students. So I'm going to speak to the Read to Achieve K4 camps that happened. As noted in the slides that you were provided in the abstract, we did offer camps at Hillsborough Elementary School, K through 4, New Hope Elementary School, and Pathways Elementary School this summer. One difference that I wanted to ensure that you noted was that we ran the camps this summer on a 3-week cycle for 5 days a week rather than the 4 weeks for 4 days. We got lots of positive feedback. I provided those in the comments for you on one of the slides. Hopefully you were able to peruse those. I wanted to just take a moment and would be remiss not to acknowledge the work of so many individuals that went into making these camps possible this summer. Whether it was pulling of resources, organizing materials, looking at data to put kids into intentional rosters, or planning instruction. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the work of our K-12 Literacy Director, Mariah Morris, who is here in the room with us tonight to support this presentation, but also that of our ELS, Beth Swain, our literacy coaches, teachers that were working the camp, also teachers that were not, our building level leaders, and our site administrators who are instructional coaches that stepped up in the summer to be leaders and take on that admin role for these summer camps. So all of these individuals work tirelessly. And then also not to mention, I would be like, it would be very poor of me not to mention our transporters. The transportation department did an incredible job this summer of adding students to routes, even when we were past the deadline, because they were eligible to come and they needed to be there, and getting them to school on time, home from school safely. So thank you to our entire OCS team for making this happen. One other thing I wanted to make sure that you took away from the slides and the information provided is that RTA this year was only second and third grade students. So if you remember back in, I think it was February when we talked last about summer programming and who was going to come, we gave out eligibility letters at middle of the year. One change this year is that we did not pull back those invitations if a student demonstrated proficiency prior to the end of the year, even if they were second and third graders. So many times in the slides and in the abstract information, you saw RTA camp and then K4 camp. That's because there were lots of kids all mixed up. Not all of them were Read to Achieve, and not all of them were not Read to Achieve. So we just called it K4 summer camp. Everybody got at least the 72 hours of literacy instruction that is required, but we had to get a little creative in managing the funding and making sure that we were funding classrooms that had Read to Achieve students with that correct funding source. So Rhonda's team was amazing in helping us ensure that we stayed straight and narrow with all of that. In terms of the students who attended, we had 1,055 students who were eligible that we gave invitations to based on middle of the year data. 45% of those students actually showed up and attended camp. So that was 471 kindergarten through fourth grade students. Of the 593 that said they were coming, about 79% of them showed up. So what that told me was, as we look forward to what's working and what's not working, is we have to improve the recruitment of these children at MOI when we get that data. If we get them signed up, we almost had 80% of them come to camp, and we saw a return on them being with us. But if we don't get them signed up, we only had 45% sign up, right? If we don't get them signed up, they don't show up either. So this year, one goal that we want to, and we've talked about this as a team, we have to be diligent in our communication with schools and ensuring that these individuals, these teachers, family liaisons, FSA navigators, the people that are closest to our families and our students, we need to leverage those relationships, not send a letter and leave that to be the source of information. We got feedback that that was not effective for all families. And so we really want schools to partner with us and really leverage their relationship with the families and with students to get them signed up. If we get them signed up and we can keep that 79, 80% of them showing up, then I think that we're doing a good thing with summer programming, and we'll call that a win. Another takeaway that we had was the middle of the year eligibility and not pulling back on those invitations was really positive. We got great feedback from families. Thank you for telling us that we were eligible early and letting me know that if you're eligible now, you're eligible all the summer. So that helped them with planning for alternative summer programming and camps. We also got a lot of positive feedback around having 3-week camps rather than 4, and doing 5 days a week versus the 4, so that they didn't have to figure out the childcare for that 5th day. So those are just some of the highlights, the key things that I wanted you to hear about the elementary K4 camps. And I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Crimmins to share about the 5-8 programming as well.
Good evening. I hope you're doing well this evening. I just wanted to draw your attention to slide 11. I think that speaks volumes to the success of the 5-8 camp. So on the last day of camp, we had a family showcase. So all the students showcased the work that they had done in their project-based learning over the 3 weeks of camp. And what made this event truly fabulous was the involvement of the parents. Did not see a student without a parent in attendance. Another highlight was watching the students who are not often recognized for their academic work to be able to have a venue and a voice in showing off their work. The teachers put in such work with making these hands-on project-based learning. I had a student pull me over and say, come look at my project on the digestive system. And instead of just a poster, the coolest thing was there was an experiment to really show how the stomach acid processes food. And then the last highlight was the positive feedback that we heard from the teachers. They expressed such a love and passion for the instruction and this project-based learning. And the other thing that they kept saying was the low student to teacher ratio, that they were able to answer questions and work with students in the moment instead of having to wait and remembering which student may have had an issue. So those were three of the highlights that I wanted to bring forward. And I wanted to also say that I agreed with all of the debrief that Ms. Wilson provided you regarding what we found was helpful and what worked well this summer. If we can get kids to camp, they stay. We had better attendance in terms of students repeating and not coming one day and then not showing up for 4 days and then coming another day. I would like to raise that our middle school students expressed we're tired, and that may have had some of the impact on the overall, this is the number of students we enrolled, this is the number that came. Also, unlike Read to Achieve, middle school students, especially our 7th and 8th graders, parents can leave them home alone for a little bit. So there's all these impacts when we get to the older students. And then lastly, unlike Read to Achieve, the middle school incentive has to be coming for what we offer, because with Read to Achieve, there is a legislative kind of punishment, so to say. If they don't, there is the risk of retention or reading retained. But with our middle school program, we need to find an incentive so that they want to come. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Braxton, who partnered with the middle school camp, and it was very exciting.
Good evening. I hope that you take time to pore over the slides, read all the words, because the pictures speak, what does it say? Pictures speak 1,000 words. I took the liberty a couple of meetings ago to leave with you the pictures of our student interns. Their faces, their activity show what they did. But tonight, I just want to reiterate how grateful Orange County Schools, CTE staff, and students are for the funding through the Office of Learning Recovery with PRC 177 and 188. These were very specific funds that were last summer and this summer with 177, and this summer and next summer with 188. Very specific funds on Summer Career Accelerator. And it's these funds that we have been able to use to provide the CTE programming in the summer. So we want to sing the praises for these funds, and we have been maximizing them to their fullest potential for the last 2 summers. 177 ends September the 30th, and I'm happy to report we've zeroed that out. I used every penny. I did not leave one penny to go back. And any district listening, if they want to send me theirs, we'll use it. So send it on, any district watching this. The only thing I want to highlight is with summer programming, we replayed a couple of the ones that we did last year. But this year, we did one in a partnership with math and CTE
using Emerald Education project-based learning. And so what it enabled the students to do was to use the engineering design process with career clusters with just-in-time math. And so this funding allowed us to braid the money to hire a CTE teacher to team up with a math teacher to teach the middle school programming. It was fabulous. The students were engaged, the staff were happy, and as you see the pictures, the showcase said it all. And if you were fortunate enough to come that day, you got to see the students in action, showing what they did over those 3 weeks. So thank you for allowing us to come and give you some highlights tonight. And at this time, I think if you have any questions, we're here to answer those.
I'd just like to thank you all for all the work that you did this summer. And I know that these summer programs are hard to fill sometimes, but it sounds like you did a fantastic job of getting students here, and the benefits paid off. So thank you all for what you've done. Mr. Atherton?
So I just wanted to say thank you as well. You know, I think one of the things, as y'all mentioned earlier, us not waiting till later, I'm very supportive of us doing that again and seeing. One of the feedbacks I got was if we can get those letters out before the rec program issues their camps, because you may think that just affects elementary, but middle schools, because some of those students go into the counselors in training, and then now they're faced with, okay, you know, which one do I do? Fortunately, when I talked to the rec department, they would allow those students to cancel the camps and the parents get all their money back, but I'm sure other camps are not as forthcoming to do that. Definitely heard a lot of positive feedback from the parents and teachers about the programs and the low ratios and, you know, how well the students were doing. And of course, the CTE, I really appreciate, you know, the identification of all of our high schools getting the opportunity and represented there. And it's just so fantastic to see their faces, and really appreciate you spending every penny. Thank you.
Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, I also just want to add my thanks, and I have to say, Ms. Wilson, you answered my questions before I had them about the participation rate. So thank you. Good, very nice. So just a question on outcomes. And I was curious if you're measuring how the kids did, and when will we hear about that?
So in the slide deck, there is a slide that lets you know how many students reached proficiency that attended camp. We are also putting that data side by side with their BOI assessments as well, so that we can look at where students ended the year, how they did in the summer, as we did use dibbles throughout the summer as well, and then can put that side by side with their BOI. We're currently in that BOI window, so very soon we will have comparison and be able to look at the kids who attended that have all three of those data markers, and kind of how does that translate.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Dole?
Thank you. That was a really great presentation with tier-specific information that made a lot of sense. And it seems like this has really grown over the past few years. You know, the first COVID summer had really unique challenges. And so as we've moved away from that, I really appreciate how these have developed into really responsive programs. And the Summer Scholars Program is amazing, and weaving CTE into that middle school tier, and the part about middle school, some of these students needing the chance to shine, be the ones presenting their projects, made a lot of sense. And just thinking, and you might already be doing this, but the thought about an incentive being field trips for those middle school tiers, and not knowing if fundraising is possible as an incentive for students.
Anyone else? Ms. Molly?
I echo the appreciation. Thank you all for that. I'm wondering also, I know the results are kind of clear cut with dibbles in particular in elementary school, but I'm wondering for middle school and high school, are there ways that you all are tracking sort of that impact
You're right, it is hard to really get a good measure. So what Emily Myers and I have discussed is taking the students' end of year from the school year 2022, 2023, the end of year Ames Web data, and then being able to compare it to their start of school Ames Web and
the
seeing
math
that, and math and reading, because the 5th through 8th graders take both.
That's right, yeah, okay, great. And I think that probably high school CTE is a little bit different as well.
Ours was about career accelerator, career exposure. So our middle schoolers and our high schoolers that participated in Startup High, thanks to the transportation department, they went from Gravely every day to downtown Hillsborough, 2 5-day camps. They were in and out of every business downtown, learning from the business owners, right? So they're not taking, there's no like numbered results, right? We're exposing them. Our PLTW, Project Lead the Way Engineering, they were doing hands-on from the middle school to the high school that bridged the gap. And then the high schoolers were able to go to Durham Tech, and they were partnering with our Durham Tech Community College. Again, thanks to transportation for the activity bus to get them to Lawson Street for those 5 days. And then, of course, with the math program, I guess that would be presented in their Ames Web data. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Sounds like it was a busy summer. Thank you all very much for all you do.
Thank you.
Okay. We move on to our next item, which is superintendent search. And Dr. Merrill and I have talked a little bit about this, and he has some ideas. He's done this before. I've never done this before. And so we're anxious to get, well, I'm not going to say we're anxious to get started, but we need to get started. And we have, I think all of us on the board have probably been approached by a firm or two that would like to work with us. And I think we need to decide a couple of things. Are we going to get quotes from both a firm and the North Carolina School Board Association or someone else? And just how are we going to proceed with this? And so I'm going to let Dr. Merrill say a few words, if he would, about what he has encountered in this process.
Well, thank you. I've been in an interesting position to have been both a superintendent going through searches myself, because I've been in a number of districts, and also assisted boards in an interim capacity now doing the same sort of process. So I have a window on it. I can't necessarily say what's best, because I think each community is a little different. I think one of the first things you really need to decide is, do you handle your own search, or do you seek someone to help? And I would recommend that you seek outside help. Some boards do take it on, but I think that's too heavy a lift for you. So that would be, sort of decision point A. And then after that, if you agree to look outward, then one of the things that Neil and I can probably do is seek some quick proposals from a number of firms that are out there, both in-state and out, that will give you some comparison basis. And I'll pause at that.
Okay. I guess the question for us is this something we want to do ourselves, or do we want a company to do that? I think I know, well, I know what I will say, but I need to hear from you folks. Is there anybody here who would be willing to take this on ourselves, or?
I'm not raising my hand to vote, I'm raising my hand to comment. As someone who has spent a lot of years in things like executive search and hiring and stuff like that, I do not think we should do this ourselves, and who went through the last superintendent search process. I think having someone external do this for us brings a level of expertise to it, and impartial, just sort of separate expertise that is important. So.
Yes, sir.
I completely agree. And, some of the things that they can do for us, for example, is filtering, especially as we get feedback from the community on key elements, and also allowing us to be able to quickly review and ask questions back in real time. I don't think it's something we should do ourselves. I think having someone else with the expertise and giving us some guidance as we go through it, I think is a much better process.
I do as well. Yeah, Dr. Moore?
Well, this will be for Mr. Atherton and Ms. Smiley. So, both of you have been through the process before. So does the North Carolina School Board Association, are they involved in any part of it?
So they're one of the groups, I guess, that you could hire to run the search process. So that's who did this last search here.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah. But it would cost money. It's not sort of included in our membership. It's a separate.
And they offer different services, like we had requested posting outside of North Carolina in different magazines and media. And so, but it cost more, like every item was an additional cost. So that's one item, I think, as we look at proposals, ensuring, side-by-side comparison. Is this extra? Is this included as part of that process?
Thank you.
Good point. Yes, ma'am.
I would also like to hire an outside firm.
I think,
Me six.
I think that is a wise decision on our part. Dr. Merrill, if you are willing to help us try to find someone, whether it, from the resources out there,
Yeah.
we would welcome that help.
Happy to do that, and we'll try and give them at least some parameters to include in all their proposals. So as Mr. Atherton said, you can compare line by line if it's a cost breakdown.
Okay.
We will crack the whip on this with these firms. They should be able to get you something in a couple of weeks because they've got a lot on the shelf. They're going to customize a little, but they have a package that they do. So we ought to be able to, I don't know if it's reasonable to shoot for the next meeting in 2 weeks, but we'll see what we can do.
Should
That
we?
Agreeable? Do we need to vote to? I think we're all in agreement, so I don't think we
I think the
need
minutes
to.
can reflect a board
Should
consensus
we
on that.
should we send some ideas? If we each have ideas on what we're looking for, should we send that to, or does that come later? And like I said, I've never done it, so I don't know.
You mean what you're looking for from a firm?
Parameters or things.
Sure, happy to take that from you, sure.
Okay. Would everybody be agreeable if you've got ideas that you send or parameters that you send that to Dr. Merrill and Mr. Atherton?
Should we forward any of these that we've gotten from firms within North Carolina, or would that be helpful, or just?
Sure,
Okay.
I'm aware of one who has gotten to some of you.
Yeah.
But yes, if you've already heard from some firms, I'm happy to include them.
Just know that any I send you, I have no context of their background.
Sure.
Okay. Any other ideas or thoughts on this? Okay.
Could I leave one for the future for you to ponder and debate among yourselves offline or whatever? There often becomes an issue about whether the process will be open or closed, and I put that here as a future consideration. And I've seen a lot of communities struggle with this some, as well as school boards. The definition being, will candidates' anonymity remain closed through the end, or will somewhere along the line it be disclosed from the floor to everyone who applies to your 3 finalists or whatever. So something just to know and contemplate. There are goods, there are benefits and cons against both those.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
Without getting into a whole discussion of that, I think that question was one of the early questions when we did this last time, the School Boards Association. That was one of the questions, right? And they could talk to us about sort of the pros and cons of those options. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Merrill.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other thoughts on this? Okay, well, let's move on to our last item, I think, if I'm looking at the right thing, which is the Woolpert study, facility condition assessment.
Yes, good evening again. Tonight's update from Woolpert will be consisting of their facility condition assessment, optimization, and benchmarking study for Orange County schools. The Woolpert team consists of Jessica Goodell, David Sturts, and Rob Olson. And I see they have tuned in, and we'll turn things over to them at this time.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I have
Jessica,
David
would you like
here
me to
with,
share?
or I can. I think I
Oh,
got
you
it.
can. Go for it. Okay.
So we've got let's see. Well, hang on. Last time I struggled with this sharing process here. Share screen. There we go. Can you see me now, David? My
Yep,
screen?
good.
Okay, good deal.
Let's go to yeah.
All right. Good evening. Let's see. So we're here to give you guys a quick update on where we are in the process and the findings that we have to date. My name's Jessica Goodell, and I'm the project manager for this, and I'm also leading the facility condition assessment portion. And we have David Sturts with us as well, who's an educational master planner who's leading the educational adequacy assessment and the master planning process as well. A quick snapshot of what the overall project looks like and where we are. We collected facility condition assessment data, which consists of repair costs as well as future needs into the next 10 years. We gathered information on your portfolio, how big are your schools. We did an educational adequacy assessment, and all of this along with capacity and enrollment projections, that's all going to tie together, and by the end of the year, we'll have a facility long-range plan or an optimization plan for you guys by the end of the year. So where we are to date is over the summer, we completed all of the field assessments. So we conducted condition assessments as well as educational adequacy assessments. We sent teams into the field to collect all that information. And we're going to highlight some of the findings here tonight. The data has been pretty well QC'd, but as we get into the master planning process itself and start digging into the actual data, we do sometimes find a few small things, but nothing that we would expect to significantly swing any of our findings for the assessment process. David's team has finished up their live attend analysis, which he's going to talk about. We've drafted our benchmark report is being reviewed, and we are working on updates. And we also published a community survey and closed that out, I believe, a week or so ago. And we had over 3,900 respondents from between Orange County schools and Chapel Hill, Carborough City schools to that survey. And that survey information will also feed into our final options and recommendations. A little bit about your facilities and what we identified during the condition assessment. You have 19 sites, 56 buildings, almost 2 million square feet of facilities. Your average construction year is 1976, so your facilities are getting pretty old. We identified nearly $100 million in current needs. So that's the number. If you had all the money in the world and you could fix everything today, that's what you would spend. And then we identified another 103 million of need over the next 5 years. So these are conditions that aren't, or systems or components that haven't failed yet, but we feel will need to be replaced within the next 5 years. So a roof may be functioning just fine today, but it may need to be replaced in 3 or 5 years. So that's what the 5-year need is. And you bring those together and you're just over $200 million in need over the next 5 years. So your current deficiencies across Orange County, this is the data organized by system. And you see there's a lot of electrical systems, which these are really your fire alarm systems. And two of the larger needs there are Pathways Elementary and Grady A. Brown. We found a lot of interior finishes as well. This is pretty common. Interior finishes kind of need a lot of refreshing pretty frequently relative to other building systems. And some of the larger dollar amounts there occur at Orange Middle and Orange High, which are fairly large schools. And then we also found some significant need there in the mechanical, and that was for ductwork and controls at AL Standback Middle School. Some highlights for the 5-year projections into the future. So again, some interior painting at Cedar Ridge High School, Gravely Middle, and New Hope Elementary. So those are kind of your larger needs there, with roofing coming in the next highest category at being at Orange High School, which is one of your larger facilities, if not the largest. River Park Elementary and Pathways Elementary as well are expected to need their roofs replaced in about 4 years from now. And one thing we talk a lot about is we calculate a facility condition index. And what this is, it's a ratio, and it helps us compare dissimilar facilities across your portfolio. And it's the cost to repair the building over the next 5 years. So those 5 years of need we've been talking about, divided by a theoretical replacement cost. And this just gives us a ratio, tells us, roughly what condition or how healthy your facilities are. And it gives us an apples to apples comparison across the portfolio, in that your high schools are always bigger. They inherently have more need than an elementary school, but that doesn't mean they're in worse condition. So this is a way for us to start looking at those facilities and figuring out which ones are good, which ones are bad, and which ones somewhere in the middle. And I really want to stress that this is only one indicator that we're using in making all of these decisions. Adequacy comes into effect, capacity, community sentiment, educational programs. There's a lot of factors that go into making those decisions, and this is just one of those decision points. And so what we found over your portfolio, the facility in worst condition is your transportation building, which is not surprising. Admin facilities always get kind of left to last, but it's also a little bit skewed in that there's a significant paving replacement needed there. So the building itself might not be all that bad, but the paving is in need of replacement. And your facilities, the schools in the kind of worst condition are just considered below average. And that's River Park, AL Standback, Central Elementary, and New Hope Elementary as well. And David, I'm going to turn it over to you for the educational adequacy assessment.
Sure, thank you. So in the educational adequacy assessment, we were looking at these individual space types, which you see on the right hand of the columns, which all roll up to these program areas, like academic support. These are the spaces that support the pullout, the intervention, guidance, and as well as the sort of the teacher collaboration space, the teacher dining lounge, administration spaces, and there's a teacher lounge in there twice. So that's a duplicate there. It's a copy paste. I can fix that the next go around. Career tech, you see PE. These are all the different individual space types that we looked at. And then what you're going to see next are how the adequacy was rolled up into these program areas, so you can get a sense about where the deficiencies are. And there's three different kinds of deficiencies that we looked at. The first is the presence or absence of the space. Do you have it? The second is it sufficiently sized? And so the majority of these spaces have space minimums according to NCDPI. And so we referenced those space minimums and then said, if you were less than 90% of the minimum, then you were undersized. And the reason we chose that is, if a space is supposed to be 900 square feet and you were 875, 890, it's not practically fair to say it's not meeting standard. But if it's, less than 90%, then that's our cutoff point. We have to draw a line, so that's where we draw it. And so, you can go to the next slide. And so what you can see is from the missing space types, the green bars represent elementary school, the middle is orange, and the blue is high school. So the academic support spaces, there's some missing at the elementary school, but keep an eye on that for the next slide when we get there. And you have
quite a bit of that missing at the high schools and middle schools for administrative spaces are pretty tied. Where you see the biggest gap in space types that are just not present is in visual and performing arts. And that just makes sense. Your buildings, particularly your elementary schools, were designed before there were many dedicated arts spaces, art rooms, kilns, sport spaces, music rooms at elementary schools. That just wasn't in the design thinking and the program thinking of the day. And so the buildings have remained static and the standards have changed. That in STEM spaces, GEM, PE, you see some of those missing. Now, if you go to the next slide, you can see undersized, and the scale, this is based on percent, what percent of these spaces that you do have are undersized. And here you see a lot more of the grid filled in. What this means is a lot more of your spaces are simply undersized. This is less than 90% standard. And so you can see, 80% plus of your special education spaces at the elementary level are undersized, based upon the NCDPI. You have visual performing arts. Those that you do have, you see how many of them missing in the previous slide. Those that you do have, a good number of those, a little over 20% at the elementary school, a little bit more than that at the middles, and about 40% or so at the high schools are undersized. So this, when we look at the adequacy score, we're actually in developing options, which we drafted some initial concepts. We're working through those with your team. We drafted those concepts last week, and we can speak to them at a high level here this evening. But yes, we're looking at needs of condition, as Jessica is bringing up, and thresholds for considering replacements as opposed to further renovations. We're also looking at capacity, which we'll get into in a minute, which is a nuanced conversation, and where you are looking at being under capacity, where you might have a little surplus, where that's spread out geographically, and how to plan for that. And then from an adequacy standpoint, we're also looking at recommended investments to renovate for some of the priority, some of these spaces that are persistently undersized and missing. And this has a compound impact. So when you start looking at adequacy remedies, if you see a school that, from an FCI standpoint, as Jessica said, we look at that based upon the cost to renovate versus the cost to replace. And in the next slide, I think we get into our bubble charts. The next slide is that. Oh, I'm skipping ahead.
Flip a 10.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get into some of the options thinking here in a minute. So I'll put a pin in that. Apologize, I was getting ahead of myself. When we think about capacity, we're looking at the enrollment, and I want to emphasize that the live attend analyses is not a trend in enrollment. It's a trend in the percent of families, pardon me, that are opting in or out of the school in which they are boundaried, in which they're districted, their home school, if you will. So we know the enrollment demographic shifts that are going at the top line number, how many kids are coming year over year. That's not what this shows. This shows, if you would say, relative stickiness. So Central Elementary School, way back in 15-16 to present, more people are staying and choosing that school from within that boundary. Eflin Cheeks, it's steady. Grady Brown, it's increasing over time, up to about 90%. 9 out of 10 kids are who live in the boundary are attending that now. Back in 15-16, that was 8 out of 10. Hillsborough is a choice school, that's why it's blank. And so you can see Pathways is at the lowest, that's about half. New Hope kind of bouncing around there around 90%. So when we're looking at the capacity, when we're looking at the condition, this is just another data set to consider as, particularly if there's a decline or a big change, incline or decline in the live-attend ratios, and we're looking at the condition data, we're looking at the utilization data. This is another data set to help inform our thinking in terms of developing options. Do we need to look at it as something doing different here? Is we need to look at maintaining momentum here, that kind of thing. If you go to the next slide, you can see the middle schools and high schools are just steady. There is almost nothing to see here. You have a high live attend that's stable at your middle and high schools. The only where you have any kind of slight bends ups and downs is at the elementary school. But quite frankly, given to relative to a lot of districts that we work with, this is highly stable, meaning the majority of folks who live in their school boundaries are opting into their school. They're choosing to go. So next slide. This is where I was getting into starting to get into capacity. So we use these standards for NCDPI-based capacity, students per room. This is where we look at essentially asking the question, what can the building handle? There's another layer when we look at this, and you'll see in the reports coming later, is based upon current policies regarding kindergarten enrollment being, capped at 18, and it bounces around until grades 4 and 5. So when you'll see that layer applied in subsequent reports. Policies change, buildings stay pretty similar. And so we want to look at both. What can the building, we want to answer the questions, what can the building handle from a capacity standpoint? And then also ask the question, what does current policy say the capacity should be? Those are different questions. And so we're answering both. The charts that you see are starting with what the building can handle. And that's the next slide. So if you want to go to that.
Okay.
And I can answer it pretty quickly. And if you turn, what the current policies basically make the elementary schools a little fuller and have no impact on the middles and highs. So how to read this grid? The facility condition index is on the y-axis. The utilization is on the x. Your sweet spot for planning is somewhere between 80 and 100% utilized and somewhere between 0 and 30% on the FCI. And here's the rationale for that. From an FCI standpoint, once you reach to or get approached about 50% FCI, what that means in practice is that if you were to go in and fix everything identified in that building in the next few years, it would cost half as much as getting an entire new building built at that same size. Now, if you build the building bigger, of course, it's going to cost more. But it's an idea to get around the, how much should I invest in this building? And the metaphor that we use is a used car. When your first car, like my first car, when I found out its value was $2,000 and I had over $1,000 in a brake job, I got a new car because the FCI in my car was too high. I knew that some other chip was going to fall and that car was not worth the repair. It's the same thing with a building. What you uncover in a visual inspection is an inherently conservative assessment. You're not getting under the walls. You're not, cracking a hole in drywall and looking behind it. You're not moving the ceiling tiles and seeing what's happening on the underside of the roof. You're doing it in visual inspection of the facility, not a destructive assessment. And so this FCI, if you start to dig into the building and do some repairs, you almost inevitably uncover more. So when you get close to that 50% FCI, it's time to start thinking about, do we look at a major renovation versus a simply just deferred maintenance plan because our needs are getting so high. So enough on that math. On the utilization, we factor down the capacity. So when we say, a classroom can have 22, we factor it down for elementary schools by 5%. So we take it down a few kids. So it's actually pretty close on the net to what you have right now on the classroom loading standards, because we factor it down a little bit. So you'll see it shift a little in the future, but not a ton. And then for middle schools, we factor down capacity 15% or 85% of its max. And for high schools, we factor it down 25% or 75% of its max. The rationale here is that an elementary school, being home-based instruction, is a fairly efficient operation. Kids tend to move around as a group, space to space to space. As you get into high school, you have groups of 6 and groups of 25 and groups of 12 and groups of 8 and groups of 17, because you have specialized courses and all sorts of different programs going on. And so the building itself operates less efficiently because you have more diversity in terms of your offerings. So that is our way that we accommodate for that and have for decades in this kind of work. So it's a lot of me talking, but what this shows is that your elementary schools, you have a couple in that sweet zone, and you have about half in that 80 to 100%, and about half a little bit under. And then the high schools, you have 1 in and 1 over, and then the middle schools are a little bit under. Now here is where it gets nuanced, because even though what the building can handle from a utilization standpoint suggests that on the net, you're fairly balanced in your schools across the district, there's two glaring realities that you have to deal with. One, go back to the slide about underutilized spaces. You have many underutilized learning environments in your schools. So a classroom that could hold 20 kids, 22 kids, that's right-sized, is a far different reality than a same class that is trying to hold the same number of kids and is 30, 40, 50% smaller. That's why it feels full. It operates fuller when you have lots of these small spaces than what you theoretically can operate at the building level. Because if you were to fill the buildings with undersized spaces to the full capacity, the smaller these rooms gets, the more that room dictates how you can and cannot teach, what you can and cannot do, because you can't rearrange the room. You can't have small groups and individual instruction in a space that can only afford sit and get, with sitting in rows, because it's so small on a square foot per student basis. So it's nuance. We understand that. And that's why, as we say, no one piece of data is a dictator, but we have to look at the whole in developing options. So long-winded explanation there, but when we looked back at some of your previous NCDPI capacity studies, we were very close at the net, and we were a little bit. We offer a little bit more, or say there's a little bit more capacity than that previous study at the elementary, and a little bit less at the high. When we factor in a couple other, the new policies on the recent policies in terms of classroom loading, we're going to be in the single-digit differences at the elementary school. So a little different, not substantial. Lastly, we also found that there were some classes that were so undersized, less than 600 square feet, we say that's not a classroom. That's a resource room. So we're not giving that capacity. Okay, next slide. So here's a big picture look. Jessica mentioned the 5-year need at 201 million. Well, when you accelerate that over the next 10 years, you're just under 400 million in deficiencies. And that's before new deficiencies arise, which they will. You have a replacement value at present of $743 million. That means you operate $750 million worth of facilities. Your average FCI now for planning purposes is 27. In 10 years, it's 50%, which, if you recall, is the threshold to consider as you approach that number, major renovations versus replacements. What this means is that either way you shake it, in the coming decade, there's a lot of renovating that needs to go on. And to the degree that it doesn't, if funding is not made available, this deferred maintenance need is going to accelerate. And that's just, you're just essentially pushing the decision down for the subsequent 10 years, when many of these buildings will need major renovation, which means going down to the load-bearing structure and rebuilding it out, or just starting over and rebuilding it. Overall utilization is in the sweet spot, right where you want it to be, 80%. However, you're imbalanced, 65, less than 65% to over 100. And this is that second sort of reality that you have to grapple with, is whereas the capacity on the net might be in the target range, your district is a fairly large geography and it doesn't work that way. And so there are areas where you have growth that we are looking at the need for additional capacity, and that is in our options to look at some additional capacity. Lastly, a key thing to think about, half of your elementary classrooms are undersized, 25% of your middles, and 20% of your highs. This is contributing to the pressure on the capacity, the felt capacity, the lived capacity in the building, and is another thing to consider when schools are at the tipping point of considering renovation versus replacement. If you renovate a building that is so small that its classrooms are most of its classrooms are undersized, half its classrooms are undersized by a significant amount, in rebuilding that school, you will lower its capacity further, because you will take 3 classrooms and make them 2, to the degree that the building will let you do that. And then you start to make a building that maybe is too small operationally to sustain itself. And that becomes another factor to consider. Do I renovate for the long term? Is that the best long-term investment here? Or do I just rebuild? If the constraints keep compiling up, rebuilding is favored when multiple data points are inadequate, even if you resolve each issue individually. So hopefully that long explanation spurred some questions. I imagine you had some already in your hip pocket, and we are happy to address them.
Thank you all very much. That is a lot of information. Questions from anyone tonight about this study?
Let Sarah go first.
Sarah?
Sure. Thank you very much for that. I have a couple of, first, just sort of logistical questions. So on slide 11, I want to make sure that I understand this. This is the missing space types. What is what's that numeric scale at the bottom? Can you explain that?
So that's the count of, that's just a raw count.
Is it a count of spaces or like schools? So like the first academic one, it looks like one green elementary. Is that one elementary school is missing some academic spaces?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. That is the space types themselves. So we have the delineation broken down by school. Not every school is missing the space type. It perhaps would have been better to put both in a percentage of whole, but this is just a count of the space types.
Cool, yeah, a percentage might be helpful there. And then the next slide does have the percentages. And then I think just as a comment suggestion, if this does go through further drafts or something, I find it confusing that the scale goes past 100. And I do think if you separated out elementary, middle, and high school and didn't have them in one bar, but had them in multiple bars, you could sort of more easily see.
That's fine, and we can certainly do that. Part of what I would like to do is something both, because the intent of this particular way to display it is to show on the net, where do you have, across the grade spans, where do you have the most challenges. But you are right, it is a little bit, you got to look at, do the subtraction there. It's a little bit easier to look at the by grade level if we do don't do a stacked bar, but a parallel. So we can do that in the next iteration.
Cool, and you might even be able to fit it on one slide if you had like
Exactly.
elementary, middle, and high this way, and then you might be able to fit it.
Well
I don't
put.
know. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, further questions? Bonnie?
Yeah, I'll start with just one on the live attend analysis. Does that include private schools or homeschooling, or is that just charters?
No. So what this is only looking at students within your district. So these kids are still opting in to Orange County schools. They're just choosing another school.
Yeah, I guess, so if you choose a private school or homeschool, you would not be in the denominator, right?
You would not be,
Or is it
because
just-
you're correct. That's a good observation. And what we see there, that is more on the year over year gross enrollment,
Yeah.
where we see that shift.
Yeah, the reason we have our data says that we're in a growing community, especially in Hillsborough and Mebane, but our enrollment is not growing. We don't have new charter schools come. We haven't had a new charter school in a while. So where are the kids going? So are they going to private schools? Are they going to home schools? And this would not tell us that.
No, a demographic assessment could do that. And I can see if I can get my hands on that. I'll see what we can find.
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to understand it, because just trying to intuitively understand the data and why it's so flat. Again, we're just trying to understand it. Second is, we're seeing things like, especially in F, when you talked about it, well, let me ask the question differently. Is there going to be a time where we're going to look at this data school by school?
Oh, sure. Yes,
how
and
does-
what we're going to do, we have it all in sort of a massive spreadsheet form at the moment. I'm actually looking at it, and what we have is we have all of the condition data. We have the ed adequacy data, and the way that it's organized here, we're looking at by school. When we develop options, we are looking at the FCI. We're looking at the school size, the year build, and then we're looking at the ed adequacy if we don't consider space type minimums, and then the ed adequacy if we do. And what that shows us by school level is how much how undersized classrooms are really at schools, and what the probable impact would be if we tried to go in there and renovate for capacity, which for ed adequacy, which would mean if you have a large issue of undersized rooms, you're going to really lower the capacity if you go in and try to renovate that school. And then the live attend is appended to the end of that and the utilization. So we have all of that, and you will see it. It's not, it's a little busy to fit on one slide, but we do have the data.
Actually, I think, I don't know about others, but I'd rather kind of go school by school, and, at the beginning of the report, you said, and I think it's really just based on the FCI, that it looks like our schools are scoring pretty well. But when you put all the data together for a school and look at our demographics, are you looking at us needing to replace schools over the next 10 years or add
Yes.
capacity in schools?
Absolutely, we are. Because again, you said it, no one single data point is the dictator.
You said that, but yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was my phrasing, but you just said the same concept. The FCI, for example, if we're looking at Central Elementary School, is at 40%.
Right.
In and of itself, if that's the only thing you were looking at, then that wouldn't necessarily on its own suggest a renovation or rebuild. However, it is one of your smaller elementary schools. Your elementary schools average about 86,000 square feet. It's 62. If when considering space type adequacy, it gets a 54% rating. And it has a little surplus capacity. Okay, so there's that's sort of looking at the whole at Central, and then we look at that building individually, but we also look at the buildings around it. What's the total elementary capacity, the total elementary enrollment? Where is growth happening? How do we accommodate that growth? If we accommodate that growth, how would we shift boundaries? And then how would the dominoes fit? And then would we still want to keep the school where it is, how it is? Or does it suggest that maybe we look at building a new school for that population as part of a larger plan? So all of those are current ideas, are in draft form. And when you see this next to review those options, we will have all of the individual school data. You'll see how it rolls up by configuration, how the options were developed relative to all of that data.
So when will we do that in this process? And, do we need to plan a longer meeting for that? Sounds like a lot of stuff.
We're doing that. We're putting that together right now.
We have that joint, we're doing that the joint
Planning.
board and county commissioner meeting in a couple weeks, right, David?
Yeah, the 26th.
6th, yeah.
Are you planning to have that for that meeting?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Okay, Carrie
ahead,
has
go
some
ahead.
questions.
Thank you, and I want to keep this short. I really appreciate your time and walking us all through this, because it takes several times looking at this. And just thinking about, the timing is that this has been a joint effort with Chapel Hill and the county. Correct. And timing is what it is, so it's nothing's always perfect timing, but I'm just thinking about this. This really makes me think about how we're in the middle of redistricting. And when we talk about redistricting alone, we tend to think of buildings as the same, and we're only thinking about capacity and where we're out of whack capacity wise. But there's, just another variable here with condition. And I really hadn't thought as much about the small, or to the point of inadequate classroom spaces that you're talking about. So it really makes redistricting more complex when we're not just looking at square footage of schools and how to balance numbers of kids. So. Yes, ma'am, it does. And I would zoom, big picture here. What we're going to recommend ultimately, the options that we're developing are pointing towards some renovations, some big renovations of schools, some rebuilding of schools, and some new capacity. A lot of investment is needed, because when you have, a $743 million portfolio of schools that's 60 years old on average, it has a lot of need. And so the reality is that once we present that final report at the end of this year, the county is going to need to work through what it can fund for that. When and we're having those conversations. So if funds are identified for a new school, for example, that would change your redistricting calculations, we're talking at the earliest 3 years in the future, probably a few more, before that would come online. And so one thing to consider is that in your present redistricting process, that there's probably going to be a need. There hopefully will be a need to revisit that in the coming 5 years or so, as you hopefully get some new capacity online, a different capacity online in other cases.
Thank you.
Mr. Atherton?
Just a quick question. So as you talk about increasing the capacity or renovations, so I know in the past we've looked at this at certain sites and we've run into ordinances on the permeability requirements for the location. How is that feeding into your analysis? Because it's pretty obvious at some sites we would be like, yes, we would love to make this area bigger, but local code won't allow that because of the maximum space. So I just want to make sure we don't get a report that says to do something we physically cannot do because of just some local requirements. So are y'all taking your recommendations and going to the planning board or that group to say, here's recommendations, here's the footprint of the school, what is actually allowed versus, hey, we just think it should be bigger or an add-on be added to the school?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We are working, this options development was done with Dwayne from your side and Al from Chapel Hill. In an all-day work session, we drafted the initial ideas. And so we had many of those discussions where, man, we'd really like to expand this building, but it's just a swamp on this side of the campus, or this site's just physically too small to do anything with. So we can't. And so we had those initial discussions. We are refining our notes into firm options, which will then vet back through the district, through Dwayne, to check on those questions on viability, to make sure that what we're presenting you is actually something that you could pursue.
The other question I had was beyond the expandability of a school is location. So we have a lot of buses that have to drive kids some significant distance, and we know there's growth areas. So how does that feed into your analysis of, hey, do you expand this, or do you take into account all the services? And the recommendation is there should be a school at a different location, because we do have a lot of schools that are more centrally located than spaced out to be closer to the students and the families. Is that part of the analysis, to look at those, if you will, other services that wrap around the school, and how does that fit into a location, expanding it versus, hey, it would be more effective to have a school at a different location, although it'll cost you more for the building, it will cost you less in services. So overall, over the next 10 years, it would be a better investment.
Oh, good. Again, good question. We do not attempt to do a total cost of ownership comparison on long-term transportation. That's a lot of variables that, quite frankly, we don't have the in-house expertise to measure, to estimate that, and certainly not in the time allotted. We do have transportation folks, but we don't, in the time allotted, we're not looking at that level. What we are looking at, we did have specific conversations about in one particular option where we're considering new capacity as an option to bring forth. It is where there's a pocket of growth, where you have a highly utilized school, and the option that we've discussed is putting that school out closer to where the growth is happening, and then looking at how you would domino the boundary scenario from there. Because from our perspective at this point, we don't want to have students passing one school to go to another.
Absolutely.
So that's the level that we're at right now. So yes, it's considered, but at a high level.
Okay, thank you.
You have any other questions?
I have, are you comfortable talking about Meb and Efland?
Sure, go ahead.
Just curious, because the example that you were just giving is what we're facing, and we're looking at that even with redistricting it in Efland, because the school is 20% over capacity and it's in a growth area. And we're
So your powers of deduction are working well. That is the area where we were talking about. And again, what we've developed here are options that range from most conservative, which is just fix what's broke, to most potentially aggressive in terms of change and adaptation of renovating and rebuilding, as we negotiated with Dwayne and team. And so this is one of those areas where, that particular area is where we're looking at potential of option of new growth, coupled with some other options that involve rebuilding schools, and not always 1-to-1, but sometimes 2-to-1.
Okay.
Okay.
One more? Last
One.
We have been talking about expanding our alternative school capacity. We have partnership has only room for 40 kids. We have a wait list that doubles that. We've also talked about adding a alternative middle school. So how are those issues or options factored into this at all, or how do we bring that into this?
Yes, they are. We did talk specifically about the alternative high school programs in both districts, and looked at where you could expand capacity, what would be different options to do that, as we understood that was a desire.
Okay.
So what you will see is, which we're presenting on the 26th, will be options for all elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and the alternative programs.
Great. Super, thank you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, and we look forward to that meeting on the 26th, when we meet as collaborative group with Chapel Hill, Carrboro as well. And I think you all have about 90 minutes to present to us, both school districts that night, and so we're looking forward to that.
That will be a good meeting. Thank you.
It will be. We look forward to that, more information.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Dwayne, for all of your work in getting this together. We appreciate it. All right. Do we have any more business that we need to discuss?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Aye. So adjourned.